Computer. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to our second POL webinar with our very special guest, Mark Gibbons, a Missoula poet who will be judging at this year's state finals. Actually, I sort of misspoke. What Mark's role is actually that he will be a consultant and be offering written commentary to the participants, and has served that role in the past, and has a long history with Poetry Out Loud. So we're very happy that he's taking the chance to do this today. Something new and different. But we are recording these sessions, and just welcome everyone to this second webinar, and welcome Mark Gibbons. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. I have been with Poetry Out Loud since its inception, which is pretty exciting. I've seen all of these young people come and go and recite poems, and so welcome to all of you. I don't know exactly how to begin this thing, but I'm gonna go kind of with what I said to you earlier, Monica, and that is that when I first experienced poetry, I experienced it at home. We didn't have a TV, for a lot of years, and my dad read poems, and he read from this big old thick book of Robert Service poems, and the one that stuck in my mind, the one that I just fell in love with, was The Cremation of Sam McGee. Many of you probably have heard that poem before, and those of you who haven't, I'll give you a little taste. But so I had memorized this thing when I was like in I think the 5th grade, and it's a very long poem, and that poem, can be done, I think, in a lot of different ways, and that's kind of what this whole thing is about for me to just say, is that there's a lot of ways to recite poetry, a lot of ways to recite a poem, and there's sort of just the conversational approach, and that's just kind of the straight facts, ma'am, and that poem, The Cremation of Sam McGee, conversationally would probably go something like this. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake LaBarge, I cremated Sam McGee. Now Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows, and why he left his home in the South to roam round the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but that land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell, though he'd often say in his homely way that he'd sooner live in hell. So that's one way to deliver that poem, and another way to deliver the poem is focusing more on the sound in the poem, because it's a ballad form. The ballad is like a song, and ballads, of course, were delivered orally for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, which is what Poetry Out Loud is all about. Poetry Out Loud, which is so much, it's an art form in and of itself, I think. And it's a lot like song, they're close relatives. And so those old ballads oftentimes were delivered with strong attention to the sound and rhythm in the poem. That poem that then would be delivered something like, there are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake LaBarge, I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows, and why he left his home in the South to roam round the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but that land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell, though he'd often say in his homely way that he'd sooner live in hell. Now, that's the way that I remember hearing poems when I first started hearing poems. People would deliver them that way, especially rhymed meter like that. And I think that we see that whole similar kind of thing happening in the rap world today, you know? So that, because when I started reciting the cremation of Sam McGee over again, I thought, wow, you know, that's a lot, that ballad form, that musical thing, it's a lot like rap music. You know, there are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails are the secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake LaBarge, I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows, and why he left his home in the South to roam round the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell, though he'd often say in his homely way, he'd sooner live in hell. You know, that kind of. Yeah,
that was fantastic, Mark.
the attraction of. I think that's one of the things I loved about poetry was the music of it. And so a person can focus on that. A person can go about a poem in a lot of different ways. And I, as I well said earlier to Monica, the importance, I guess, of doing this, I think, is that the poem becomes yours. You own it, and you will own it for life. And that's what knowing it by heart means. That's what they say when you know a poem by heart. You'll have it for the rest of your life, and you can always offer it up to somebody. And of course, a poem like The Cremation of Sam McGee not only has great music to it, but it's just full of drama, and that whole, you know, it's just all that creepy, the cremation of Sam McGee, you know, all that. So when I was first sharing, you know, poetry with kids out loud, when I would do that poem, I do it very, very dramatically, you know. So it would be something like this. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake LaBarge, I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows, and why he left his home in the South to roam round the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but that land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell, though he'd often say in his homely way that he'd sooner live in hell. So all of those recitations or ways of going about doing a poem are viable, and you just need to find how you relate to the poems that you choose. Why are you doing it? Why did you decide to do poetry out loud? That's a good question to ask, I guess. You know, I mean, I'm assuming that you're in love with language, and I think that's what's most important. And if you know, one of the things that what you have to do if you're going to offer a poem out loud is you have to consider that you want to be heard. And if you want to be heard, you have to do it at a pace and a level of volume and a level of articulation that is very, very important. And then there's issues of, you know, just the whole tone of the poem. How does the poem feel to you? I mean, you chose this poem because it made you feel a certain way. And so you need to bring that poem sort of inside your body. You need to own it. You need to feel how that poem affects you, and then you need to transfer that back to your audience. I mean, that's what it's really all about. You're giving them the gift of this poem. And so you have to really take it inside yourself and understand what it means to you. That doesn't mean you have to understand it, because sometimes poems don't make very good sense. But how it makes you feel and how you articulate it and how you present it is all your decision. One of the things that helps is to visualize. You know, a lot of poems are just stories, like that Cremation of Sam McGee poem. You know, on Christmas Day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. You can kind of see that, you know. Talk of your cold through the parka's fold, it stabbed like a driven nail. Yeah, all those kinds of images and whatnot, you need to really look at that stuff and then be able to, you know, communicate that back to your audience, which is another good question to ask yourself. Who is your audience? You know, who are you giving this poem to? Well, obviously, you're giving it to everybody in the audience at Poetry Out Loud. Anybody that's going to listen to you is your audience. But you, as a speaker of the poem, I think it's really a good idea, particularly when you're memorizing the poem and getting it down. You know, oftentimes it's a real good idea to actually visualize someone that you're giving this poem to. And oftentimes I think that is a person that's very close to you, a person that you can talk to openly, honestly, personally. And if you can visualize that person, or even put them in the room if you've got them around, and then give the poem to them, that's going to make the poem come alive in ways that it wasn't before. It's just the way it's going to work. And I think
that's good advice, by the way.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times, you know, as far as all the things that that we, so much of Poetry Out Loud, you can't see the whole of me at this point, but it's a full-bodied experience. Poetry Out Loud is, and you know, a lot of times people, we don't know what to do with our hands, or you know, or you've got sort of, we have natural sort of tics that we, you know, sometimes do, especially when we get nervous and things like that. And so that's a challenge for people to go through dealing with all those sort of things. But I think the key is that if you really embody the poem, if you really get personal with that poem and you bring it inside and you make it yours, the gestures, the expressions, your whole presentation of the poem is going to take care of itself. If there's a few things that don't work out, your coach, people like me, because I get to deal with the people that get to go on to DC from here, which is one of the most entertaining aspects of this whole thing for me, is I get to actually see you work on your stuff, and I give people feedback too, you know, like just little tiny things. But for the most part, you need to get that thing where you want it, and I hate to mess with anything that anybody has beautifully done, you know, but once you've got it down and once you have taken it and really own it, you can then tweak little things in it. And that's when advice from other people come into play. So, I mean, people can help you, but the real job is yours. And that is Why did you choose this poem? What do you like about this poem? You need to love the poem, and then spend some time with the poem, and really work it.
Thanks for all that, Mark. And last time we talked about this as well, but I'd love to hear your take on it. I think something that, and I may be projecting a little here, I've never been personally a Poetry Out Loud contestant, but I think a lot of students do struggle with that fine line between performance and recitation, because it can go too far when you're trying to live inside that poem. That's a learned behavior, right? As far as where to draw the line.
Well, I mean, this is my belief, and it's you know, I spent some time in theater also, and so I mean, I think that it's much easier to pull back from something than it is to project something out. If it's, you know, the whole thing that my message would be is try things. Push yourself a little bit beyond, and it's okay to get a little bit dramatic. Now, if it's like way, you know, I mean, obviously over the top, and then the first thing that your coach or somebody's going to say to you is, you got to pull that back. That's too much. Right. Poetry Out Loud, based on what I've seen, what you can see in all of the CD recitations of people who have been very, very successful for this at this program, it's not an acting situation. It's not the stage. It's not theater. You can't take it that far. The focus is on the poem and on the language. So you're bringing your recitation of that stuff, you're bringing it out in a way to deliver the message of the poem. And that's not exactly the same as being on stage. You know, I mean, so there is a, that's not a fine line exactly, but it's, you know, I mean, there's a, well, I mean, like, do you have those things queued up?
I don't at the moment, but I will.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. And I mean, they were like, it was like, I think it was like 6, 7, and 8 in the middle of that, that DVD companion thing. There's one, I mean, was Shantae, I think, is the first one. And then the second one is the young woman who does I Am Waiting, the Ferlinghetti poem. But the first one, you know, you can see in her presentation that she could be on stage. She could be, I mean, she is on stage. That's an actor's performance, but it doesn't go over the top. It doesn't detract from the poem. It adds to the poem, and that's the whole thing. You don't want the presentation or the actor, you know, to get to detract from the poem. You want the presentation to complement the poem and express it in the way the poet meant the poem to be delivered. Now, see, that's it. It's a fairly simple concept, but it takes a lot of work, of course, I think, to pull that off. Ultimately, what you're doing, you know, recitation of a poem, what is it ultimately? It's entertainment. That's what it is. We're here to entertain each other. It's not just like a contest as to who's the best memorizer. It's entertainment. Are you ready?
Sorry. Even as much as we talked about this,
yeah, Murphy's Law, right?
I didn't realize that my CD player wasn't going to work, so I'm having to pull them up on YouTube. But we can still do it, and I just need to remind myself how to share my screen, and I think I can do that now.
This is.
I know, Mark. I know. I promised you no technical.
No.
This is not a technical difficulty. It's just an extra step. But I think if I share my screen now, and please tell me if you're not all seeing it. But Shantae, will be up here shortly as soon as I hit go. Let's see here. Oh my goodness. All right. We're gonna have to come back to this.
Well, let's
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I can.
Go ahead, and I'll let you know when it's ready. Sorry
I can
about
do
that.
something. I can do something else too. I could do one of mine.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
And I don't know if I've done this. I know I've done it before at some point in time at Poetry Out Loud. I don't know if I'm abusing you again, any of you that may be watching this thing, but I wrote a poem called Melodious Blues, and it's a rhymed poem, and but it goes like this. Let language play its tricks. Don't bore us with your hands. Don't rattle, understand. Patrick Kavanaugh, or don't fret about their rhymes. They inherited a lyric deck of hearts, jokers, clubs, signs that spades beguile the natty bastards who deal diamonds and hold the cards. Let's sing of taters, scabs, and heather, tongues hungry for love and words. And if you're with me, you must be a poet. If you're with me, you're along for the ride. You don't have to agree with Pat or me. But from Leonard, you cannot hide. Everybody knows his dice are loaded. The bleeding cracks just let light in. Like birds on a wire outside his tower. All we can do is sing till the end. And we know nothing. So we fake it. We make it up as we go along. And if we're lucky, there's a piano playing in our heart when we sing our song. So that's a little bit dramatic. It's a little bit dramatic, but I don't think it detracts from the poem. Anyway, so that's, I mean, you know, that's, but is Shantae around?
Yep, I have her up here, and the awkward part is sharing my screen is an extra step. So hang in there, and I'm gonna bring her up now.
Well, you know what? We're, oh no, okay, never mind.
All right, so tell me if you can see her now.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so.
By Robert E. Hayden. When it is finally ours, this freedom, this liberty, this beautiful and terrible thing, needful to man as air, usable as earth, when it belongs at last to all, when it is truly instinct, brain matter, diastole, systole, reflex, action. When it is finally one. When it is more than the gaudy mumbo jumbo of politicians. This man, this Douglas, this former slave, this Negro, beaten to his knees, exiled, visioning a world where none is lonely, none hunted, alien. This man, superb in love and logic, this man shall be remembered. Oh, not with statutes, rhetoric, not with legends and poems and wreaths of bronze alone, but with the lives grown out of his life, the lives fleshing his dream of the beautiful, needful thing.
There you go.
So that's pretty spectacular.
Brandon,
Yeah, that's.
Oh, so sorry. I forgot to turn that off for a second.
Oh, I thought maybe you had
On the
tuned in or
YouTube
something.
channel for Poetry Out Loud, of course, it just goes from one to the next. So, but we have the other two poems that you mentioned to me. Did you want to also share those, or do you want to talk about this one for a bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, Shantae's poem is, I mean, that's a performance that comes alive, and you know, I mean, she could be on stage, and of course it's certainly, I mean, choosing poems, you know, there you go. I mean, the poem was, is that Hayden? Is that a Hayden poem?
I believe so. Hold on.
Yeah, it's a Robert Hayden poem, Frederick Douglass.
Yep, it is.
Yeah, but so it wasn't written by a woman, but so we have a woman delivering that poem, and we have a Black woman delivering a poem about Frederick Douglass, and so you mean that's just your choice of work. I think is very, very important too to who you are. I mean, sometimes it's very difficult for a man to choose a poem written by a woman with a real strong woman's voice in it, and be very effective with that. And the same holds true, I think, the other way. So you always want to think about that. You know, I mean, how are you going to convey this with who you are? And I think Shantae chose the perfect vehicle for her to put that thing right out of the park. Besides the fact that she's just a heck of a great actress too. Now the second one that is queued up, I keep forgetting this girl's name.
Madison Niermeyer?
Madison Niemeyer. Yeah, this she does a Lawrence Ferlinghetti poem, and Ferlinghetti's poems are, you know, they're based in repetition. And so it's that repeated phrase over and over again, and that becomes kind of hypnotic and kind of, you know. And so, I mean, she does a great job, I think, of dealing with that aspect of the poem. It can become somewhat boring to say the same thing over and over and over again. And she does a great job with this poem. Check this poem out.
Okay. Again,
Madison.
a minute, but oops, here we go. Hang in there. Oops, sorry. Here it comes. All right.
I Am Waiting by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. I am waiting for my case to come up, and I am waiting for a rebirth of wonder, and I am waiting for someone to really discover America and Wales, and I am waiting for the discovery of a new symbolic Western frontier. And I am waiting for the American eagle to really spread its wings and straighten up and fly right. and I am waiting for the age of anxiety to drop dead, and I am waiting for the war to be fought which will make the world safe for anarchy. And I am waiting for the final withering away of all governments, and I am perpetually awaiting a rebirth of wonder. I am waiting for the second coming, and I am waiting for a religious revival to sweep through the state of Arizona. And I am waiting for the grapes of wrath to be stored, and I am waiting for them to prove that God is really American. And I am waiting to see God on television, piped onto church altars, if only they can find the right channel to tune in on. And I am waiting for the Last Supper to be served again with a strange new appetizer. And I am perpetually awaiting a rebirth of wonder. I am waiting for my number to be called, and I am waiting for the Salvation Army to take over. And I am waiting for the meek to be blessed and inherit the earth without taxes. And I am waiting for forests and animals to reclaim the earth as theirs. And I am waiting for a way to be devised to destroy all naturalism without killing anybody. And I am waiting for linnets and planets to fall like rain. And I am waiting for lovers and weepers to lie down together again in a new rebirth of wonder. I am waiting for the great divide to be crossed. And I am anxiously waiting for the secret of eternal life to be discovered by an obscure general practitioner. And I am waiting for the storms of life to be over, and I am waiting to set sail for happiness. And I am waiting for a reconstructed Mayflower to reach America, with its picture story and TV rights sold in advance to the natives. And I am waiting for the lost music to sound again in the lost continent in a new rebirth of wonder. I am waiting for the day that maketh all things clear. And I am awaiting retribution for what America did to Tom Sawyer. And I am waiting for Alice in Wonderland to retransmit to me her total dream of innocence. And I am waiting for Child Roland to come to the final darkest tower. And I am waiting for Aphrodite to grow live on at a final disarmament conference in a new rebirth of wonder. I am waiting to get some intimations of immortality by recollecting my early childhood. And I am waiting for the green mornings to come again. You dumb green fields, come back again. And I am waiting for some strains of unpremeditated art to shake my typewriter. And I am waiting to write the great indelible poem. And I am waiting for the last long, careless rapture. And I am perpetually waiting for the fleeting lovers on the Grecian urn to catch each other up at last and embrace. And I am awaiting, perpetually and forever, a renaissance of wonder.
That's a terrific.
I love that poem.
Yeah, it's a great. I love that poem too. But and she just does a wonderful job with it. I think the variation in her pace and the variation in her tone and she just and the way that she plays back and forth on the images that obviously are built in to be played within the poem, and the way that she hits certain sort of words within the context of delivery, and that's something that that one to get that variety going in the delivery of the line. You know, there are obviously words that you hit more in the line than others, and so that kind of variation in tone, I think she pulls that off wonderfully in that poem, which could be, you know, boring to some people by the time they got to the end, but not with her.
Well, you made us aware that repetition was coming in that poem, and as audience members we know that the repetition is happening, but it's never in her delivery irritating.
Exactly.
And it kind of never gets old.
Right.
Because of her variation. So
and even the way that it seemed to me, you know, that even the way that her tone in the reception of wonder, you know, she kind of almost sings it a little tiny bit in spots, but but then in those mid lines, when she's running through the images, those things are filled with variety. And then she comes back to but I am waiting for the young, and that's just, it's like it's quite musical.
I wasn't ready for her to be done actually with that poem. I could have taken more of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think the last one that was in that succession of performances was one of our Montana state champions from
Joshua Kelly.
A long time ago. Yeah, Joshua Kelly.
I think it was 2007 that he made it to the top 5 nationally.
Right. And so anyway, Josh was an incredibly gifted actor. And it was one of those people that when we were talking earlier about, bringing theater to the performance, he brought so much theater to the performance. The first time I heard him doing the poem in practice, I mean, he blew everybody away in state competition, I think. Mm-hmm. He was just that kind of over the top good. And but the first time I heard him, do it, I said, Josh, that's just incredible, but you've got to pull this thing back. You've got to pull it down a little bit. I mean, it was, there was blood all over the floor, So anyway, this is his performance at state.
Okay. Again, I apologize for the awkward couple of steps, but
it's all right.
Here it comes.
A Wilfred Owen poem.
Dolce e Decorum Est by Wilfred Owen. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs and toward our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshot. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Gas. Gas. Quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling, and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light as under a green sea. I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dream you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face, like a devil's sick of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, You would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie. Dolce et decorum est pro patria more. It is sweet and fitting to die for one's country.
Wow.
That is a powerful performance. And of course, you know, I mean, that's a perfect vehicle for a really good actor. You know, I mean, because of the fact that it's a first person poem, it's an experience. The speaker of the poem is having the experience. So they are there and they are visualizing what's going on, and they are describing to you in all of its horror what they're witness to. And so I mean, I for an actor, those are the pieces that you're looking for. If you can find those, because that's, I mean, it doesn't get any stronger than that. It puts you right there.
I'd have to agree with that. I was feeling pretty nervous as he spoke his words, so that's a good indication that he was getting the feeling across.
Yeah, and I also think that, you know, I mean, one of the other things that that struck me about the way he went about it was that I mean, he sort of, you know, Wilfred Owen was an Englishman, was an English officer in World War I, and he wrote these poems in the trenches, and that's where he died. And he didn't have to die there, because he was wounded and taken away a couple of times. Each time he returned to be with his fellow soldiers, and he died there. And Josh's rather English sort of delivery that, you know, I mean, it is not that's not Alec Guinness, but I mean, he does hold that sort of Englishness to that delivery, and I think that really adds to it too. So it's just, you know, it's a real great vehicle to find a first-person poem that's very, very dramatic, like Shantae's poem, kind of, and like one of Josh's, if you're an actor, as opposed to Madison's poem, which was just a straight-up poem that was like non-gender related, and she just gets into the music and the rhythms and plays with it that way, and gives you a wonderful poem. So.
Excellent.
Those are three great examples. I would suggest, you know, you have these resources that your coach has through Poetry Out Loud. Check those things out. You know, look at them all, and then, you know, when you choose your poems, you know, the first task, of course, is memorization. And you know, once you get those things down and kind of you have the words in your head, then really start playing with things and pushing yourself. Do them in a lot of different ways. Get big, get wild, and whatnot. I mean, it's okay, because by the time you get to the regional finals or the state finals and to deliver the poem, you know all the rules and the parameters and whatnot, and it'll be right when you get there. And your coach will make sure of that, of course. That you don't go, you know, over the top and start singing in the rain or something like that.
Those are all such great ideas, Mark. But we have a couple of questions from Norma, our regional coordinator in Columbus, and she says, excellent ideas. I have a question. Does the length of the poem make a difference? The one just played is quite long. Are judges swayed by the length? Or maybe it wasn't that long comparatively. And then her follow-up was, that was 3 minutes long. Maybe short ones don't work that well.
Well, you know, I mean, for one thing, you can't predict what judges are going to do. That's the bottom line right there. I used to do speech and drama stuff years ago, and in which was all involved with judges, and you could no more predict what was going to happen than I couldn't anyway, because I just didn't see it the same way. And even at Poetry Out Loud, as a judge, and then now in the last several years, just as this kind of a consultant guy, kind of sitting on the outside, I don't necessarily agree with a lot of what happens in terms of judging. I mean, my perspective is different than somebody else's is, and that's just the way it is. I do think that length is going to influence most judges. I mean, if you do Robert Frost's Fire and Ice, as opposed to like what couple of, well, all those three we just heard, more than likely they're going to probably weigh in stronger, just simply because it's not a 12-line poem. That's a pretty short poem. A lot of Emily Dickinson poems are very short poems. But I mean, so I guess there's a couple of different ways of looking at that. I think a lot of the pre-20th century work, you're better off with a shorter piece there than you are in a more 20th century and beyond. I think, and that doesn't mean that you need to choose the long poem. It just means that if it's a very, very brief poem and it's a very popular and been done a lot of times, it may not be the best, you know, poem to compete with. But the other thing too is, why are we doing this? You know, we're doing it because we love the poem, and if you love that poem, do it. I mean, or at least do it for yourself. You know, you can have it for yourself. You don't have to do it at the competition even. But I mean, that's kind of my take on that. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the length is going to probably impress some judges more than others.
Right, and then there's the accuracy piece as well, because better to do a shorter poem and have it.
Person, go ahead.
Oh, this is just my commentary in that you know, if you're concerned about accuracy in the memorization, better to do a shorter or medium length poem and have it 100% accurate, because I think sometimes students might think they can get by with some inaccuracies, and it's actually that thing that hurts them the most.
Right.
Whereas their delivery is excellent, accuracy matters, right?
Yeah, and particularly, it totally matters when it comes to the competition, for sure, because they take points directly off based on inaccuracies. And by the time you get to those shades or variations of the people at the very top of the heap, you know, a couple of points of accuracy can make or break the situation if you're you know, trying to you know, go on and get to Washington D.C., which is very much worth the trip for sure.
What year was it that you went?
It's a good question.
I should know this because it was in your bio, but I forgot to.
Stella Shannon was the state champion that year. And so whatever year that was, she was the state champion. And but that, I don't remember the actual year.
That's okay. Is there anything that was your takeaway from attending National that you wanted to impart upon Montana participants that they might not know? I'm totally putting you on the spot here, but
no. I mean, the thing about that experience for a student, for me, for anybody, is that, I mean, you know, you get to you get to be in a place that's a pretty special place historically, and so you get to take advantage of that. That's pretty cool. And usually members of the Montana congressional delegation will interact with those students and kind of show them around to an extent. That's pretty neat. Just the Smithsonian, the museums, just that aspect of being there is very, very cool. You know, as far as the competition goes, I think that by the time people get there, everybody there pretty much realizes just how cool it is that everybody is so good that's there. And so there it goes back to that shades of who comes out on top again. Yeah. You know, it's that judging thing there again. And I don't know how that's decided. I don't know how they do the Academy Awards. I look for movies. I've seen the actors and actresses. They're all off the charts. They all deserve a great big statue.
Right.
You know, one of them gets it. Okay.
Right.
So it's a popularity contest. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And I don't want to debunk that aspect of it, but I just want to say that that's not what's most important here.
I noticed from watching nationals last year how supportive the students are of one another.
Yeah.
I feel that that's the case in our Montana state finals as well. That it happens to be one of those competitive things that in the end isn't as competitive as it might be in another realm.
Right.
I think in the arts, we're good at this in general anyway, supporting one another. But in the competitions in particular, I noticed how much support the contestants at the national level were giving one another for their performances. And I think that's a really cool thing to see happen with this age of participants, especially.
Right.
Very mature, you know? Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, everybody understands that, you know, and because of the fact that it is a subjective kind of judging,
Right.
you know, everybody kind of realizes that, you know, we're just going to do our thing and somebody's going to get it, and
yeah,
who knows, you know?
Yeah. Well, we are just about out of time today, Mark, and thank you so much for spending this time with us and with the Poetry Out Loud participants, students and adults across the state. And we will be making the recording of this session available to everyone tomorrow when we send out the POL weekly. The recording will be accessible through that, so be looking for that. We'll also have a couple more of these webinar sessions coming to you, including one the week before state finals, and we're really hoping that we'll be able to plan a time for that one where student participants will be available to ask questions and that sort of thing. So any teachers watching, if you have any input on what time of day might work best for that, please let me know. And I just really, again, want to thank everyone for their participation in Poetry Out Loud this year. I think it's going to be a great set of regional competitions and a great state competition coming up. And if you need to know anything at all that I might be able to help you with, my email address is monica.grable, Grable, @mt.gov. And if you're not getting the POL weekly, please let me know that as well. We're really trying to get everybody on board with all the communication pieces we're trying out. So also you can look for Montana Poetry Out Loud on Facebook, and we'll be using that more regularly now between now and the state finals. So thank you everyone so much. And again, Mr. Gibbons, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.